I came to the United States from the Soviet Union in May of 1980. So when this show began in January of 1981, which is when the timeline of the show begins, I remember that period very, very well.
I'll say it wasn't fun coming from the Soviet Union.
I had just moved back to work with the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade and be their lawyer for a 2-star general. And our whole focus was on the Russian problem set.
The American people have elected
a madman. And I was like, oh, just you wait. Just you wait.
The music is so good.
Miami Vice.
That guy was in the trunk for like 3 days.
Yeah, with a dog bag in his mouth.
And I'm thinking the whole time, how long did he have to pee?
Russia, I indicated, is a geopolitical foe.
You know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
Make sure I don't do any spying around here.
Oh, you better not.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000.
The 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back.
Hey everybody, it's finally happening after months and months and months of threatening to do this. We are finally doing the Americans Rewatch. I'm Julie Roginsky here with my co-host and Mayday Network co-founder, Michelle Kinney. And we have this incredible group of people who are joining us. I'm going to go around. We've got Craig Miller. We've got Jeff Jarvis, we've got Lieutenant Colonel Jaclyn Urso, we've got Olga Lautman, we've got Nina Jankowicz, and I am so thrilled because we have Russia experts, and we've got culture experts, we've got TV critic experts, and we've got people like me and Michelle who just like a good time. Not really experts, I don't know what, but we are so happy to have everybody here. Hopefully everybody has caught up on at least the first episode of the first season of The Americans. Michelle.
Yeah.
You are obsessed with the show, as I know everybody else here is as well. I have never finished watching the show all the way through. I know. So
How could you not have? I don't get it.
I know. How do you just stop? Like, aren't you curious? Like, what happens?
Yeah, I think so. I forgot what was going on in my life that made me stop. Something was happening. Was I having a baby?
I'm with you on that. Having a season to catch up on.
Something was going on. I will say this. I think maybe I'm a little unique of this crew of people who watch this show in that I came to the United States from the Soviet Union in May of 1980. So when this show began in January of 1981, which is when the timeline of the show begins, I remember that period very, very well. And I have to admit that I always in the back of my mind had this, and it's crazy, which is probably why I kind of took the show more seriously than I should have, always had this panic at the very back of my mind that my parents were actually secret KGB agents. I swear. Which, as I know they're not, and if they're watching this right now, they'll probably be really pissed off that I'm that they could have been, because they're so anti-Soviet, but yet, I think the KGB back then, this was the start of the second Cold War, the Cold War II. Jeff, you remember that time. It was, things had kind of cooled down a little bit, and then Reagan came back into office and started the rhetoric up again. And so I think for that reason, the Soviets were just such boogeymen back then. But in retrospect, as we sit here today in March of 2026, those were like the good old days, you guys. Things are pretty normal. I mean, I guess I'll go around. Jeff, I'll start with you because you remember those days as well as I do, right? Like, don't things seem pretty scary back then, but in retrospect, maybe not as scary as they seem right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and well, I'm not a Reagan fan. I'm no Joe Scarborough, certainly. Never was, never will be. But Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall is a much lower bar of international interference than I'm going to kill or capture the leaders of countries. Right. So it was a very different time and lighter than now. Yes.
Nina, you know about Russian disinformation, and you know about what the Russians, and Olga, you as well, so jump in, know about what the Russians were capable of. I mean, does this show ring true to you? I know that it's based obviously on real events, but what do you think? Is that stuff still happening now, you think?
Ooh, is it happening now? Well, it wasn't that long ago comparatively. I mean, it was I think in the 2010s when we discovered this pretty deep cover American network of spies. And if you go to the FBI museum, although I wouldn't recommend that under this current administration, because who knows what you'll come out with, could be an STD or something.
Or
but
whether you'll come out at all.
Yeah.
Exactly. But
With
if you
a
go to the
tracker.
FBI museum, they have this exhibit on, and I'm forgetting the name of the family now, but there was a deep cover family in, I think, New York or New Jersey, that lived this exact same life that actually inspired the show. I will confess, though, so in 2013, when the show first started, I had just finished my graduate degree, or was about to. And I'd spent a pretty significant amount of time in Russia. I speak Russian, and I remember watching the pilot and being like, "This is so corny. I'm not gonna watch the rest of it." My husband was like, "No, like let's keep watching. I bet it's gonna get good. It's getting like really good reviews." And I will say, as they got on, their Russian got better than the first episode, in which Carrie Russell, bless her heart, she's like, "My name was," and then in the worst accent ever, Nadezhda.
My name was Nadezhda.
So never Nadezhda. And I'm like, come on.
I am sorry.
I'm sorry.
I am sorry.
which means hope in Russian, and I wonder if they gave her that name on purpose, or whether that was just a random Russian name that they cut out. Olga, what were your thoughts there?
I actually worked on a Russian spy in Ukraine. Her name was Nadezhda, one of several names. So I came here like you in the 70s. So, and I remember the 80s. I mean, not as well. I mean, I wasn't politically active. I was just a kid going to school. During that time, I'll say it wasn't fun coming from the Soviet Union, because at that time I was like literally picked on. First of all, I was probably the only Olga in Brooklyn, because at that time there were no Soviets. I mean, a handful in the US. So my name. And then I was called a commie. I didn't think my parents were KGB spies, but everyone in school used to think so, especially when my parents were the first to get a cell phone, which was like at that time like this big. They were not KGB spies. But at that time, it was tough growing up, because it was, a lot of getting picked on. I will say, I will take that any day over the Americans now who have basically become shills for Russia and assist Russia in, running their influence operations, all their operations. At least in the 80s, I mean, the fact that I came from the Soviet Union, people actually understood who the enemy was. And even though at that point it was tough, now, for instance, after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and someone overheard me speaking Russian and gave me a dirty look, and I was like, yes, people are coming back, because it's, too many people got too softened on Russia, and, completely forgot that they still are a very dangerous adversary, and one of the top adversaries that's been very successful in the U.S. So that is that. As far as with the show, I actually must have been, I don't know, right around before the 2020 election. I was monitoring Russia's operations for the 2020 election. And that's when I was like, I need a weekend break. And I was like, what better way? Let me find a show to binge watch. And I don't know how I got stuck with the Americans, because that's really not. But it was interesting, because I watched the show, and I mean, it's based on a real illegals couple, which, like Nina just mentioned, we picked up over a dozen of them in 2010, including Anna Chapman, and including, interestingly enough, with the Epstein stuff happening now, one of Bill Gates' Russian bridge player affairs, she was photographed with Anna Chapman in New York. So you could just see how deep, I'm sure she's still in the US, whereas Anna Chapman made it, got arrested and then eventually was exchanged in a spy swap. But anyway, the show left me very confused because after watching it, I was like, this feels like one of Russia's influence operations, only because of the fact that the real KGB and the real illegals, they were indoctrinated so much that they would never have any kind of moral conflict about serving Russia's security services, or at the time the KGB, especially in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which the show, I rewatched episode 1 today, they are trained in the 1960s, and they get sent to the U.S. in the 1960s, mid 1960s, and get activated in 1981, or at least that's when the show starts off. So this is one of the things that I kind of left scratching my head, like with the KGB, they were such a brutal organization. They would not sit there and, scratch their head like, oh, should we, not be doing this? Maybe we should give our children a normal life and have all these moral dilemmas. That's more of an American thing.
To let them grow up and live their own lives. They're not to be a part of this.
This is how Americans think. This is how Americans are. And even just to wrap up, you see it even in war. With the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, you see Russian military, if someone gets injured, they will shoot the person dead and just leave them and kick them off in a ditch and continue moving on to their objectives. Whereas you see with Americans and other Western countries, if an American soldier is shot dead, Americans will do everything to recover the body and bring them back home. It's a different mentality. So with this show, it just reminded me with episode 1 how, yes, it was correct as far as, some of the things, except the mentality and the moral dilemma that came with it.
Yeah. Jaclyn, I want to ask you about this because I'm sure you followed, like all of us did, that crazy story from the last year where that Russian couple who was also part of an illegals program, pretending to be, I think they were Argentinian. Is that somewhere in Eastern Europe? Was it Slovakia or Slovenia, or I forgot where they were based? They were pretending to be these random South Americans who were living there. They had 2 kids. They were eventually picked up as part of the illegals program. And it was only when they were being flown, but they were also exchanged in a spy swap. And only as they were being flown from somewhere in Eastern Europe to Moscow did they tell their children, who I think were teenagers at the time, that yes, mom and dad are not really, senor and senora, whoever from Paris. They are, whatever their real names were, Russian. And then the flight was very short because, as I said, they were flying somewhere from Eastern Europe to Moscow. So it was probably like an hour flight, a 2-hour flight. And then they land, and who's meeting them on the tarmac but Putin with flowers for the mom, who's hugging, crying, and, she's finally home, and this is such a wonderful thing. And, you watch that, and all I could think about is these poor kids will never try, forget having a normal relationship, right? They will never, ever trust anybody again. If you can't trust your parents to tell you the truth, how are you ever going to have any kind of trusting relationship? So I don't know if anybody here, Craig, Jaclyn, anybody else wants to jump in, but how do you even live? And do not give anything away about anything to do with the Jennings children, because I don't know, so do not give it away. But I watched that, and all I could think was, wow, if I found out that my parents, after all these years, were not who my parents pretended to be, that's that. I don't know.
How heartbreaking could it be? How much of a betrayal? I mean, your whole life is just a farce. You grow up thinking one thing, and then all of a sudden it just completely changes, and you're on a plane, and the next thing you know, you land and your mother's hugging Vladimir Putin. It's like the entire opposite of what you've grown up thinking. It's just such a farce. I'd be so heartbroken I wouldn't be able to trust anyone for the rest of my life.
And then where do you go to school, right? Like, do you go to a Russian school now, where like all of a sudden you just go to like, you know, school number, you know, like Russian, you know, school number 6 in Moscow, and you're whatever the name of it is. Like, it's kind of nuts. Like, it's just crazy.
It's an uphill battle to learn Russian at that age too.
Yeah, you know what? Trust me, it is an uphill battle to learn Russian, period. Although I have to say, Michelle, you and I talked about this.
Yeah.
For anybody that watches Heated Rivalry, that guy's Russian was very good.
Я хочу только тебя.
So good.
Really
so
good.
good.
Yeah.
And
Really
I was very curious to know what because you're one of the only people I know who speaks fluent Russian. And, you know, I was like, it sounds super Russian to me, but, you know, what do I know? But you confirmed my guess here. But no, I mean, like, listen, first of all, the look on that girl's face. I remember the daughter when she's getting off the plane. I remember the snapshot of that photograph. And I was like, oh, she's just like, what the is going on here? And I thought about that rewatching the episode today. So we, you know, a bunch of us, I think we all rewatched today or in the last couple of days, the pilot. And, you know, I came about the show, I think a little bit differently. I think Craig actually is the person who told me to watch it because he was like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you watching the show? And I don't think I will. And the thing that's funny too is 2013, Barack Obama was still president. None of the world that we're living in right now had started yet. And, you know, I think it was totally off my radar. I was sad that Mad Men was like over or like about to be over or something. But then 2016 happened, right? And then Russians interfering in our elections became. But don't forget also in the 2012 election, that was when everybody laughed at Mitt Romney for saying that Russia was the greatest geopolitical threat.
Russia, I indicated, is a geopolitical foe. Excuse me, it's a geopolitical foe. And I said in the same paragraph, I said, and Iran is the greatest national security threat we face.
And literally Obama in the debate was like, this guy. And I was like, come on, Iraq, I need a job.
Wait, Nina, actually what you said was, to be clear, because actually this is one of the very few times that I was a Fox at the time, and I was like, no, Mitt Romney has a point, which I think was like a record breaker ever from you, for those words to come out of my mouth. But no, what Obama actually said was the 1980s called, and they wanted foreign policy.
Yes, that diss.
Because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, you know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
Interesting that we're watching this show now while the 1980s certainly called and their foreign policy was that.
Yeah. Well, and look, we ended up in the situation that we're in right now, in part because the Obama administration did not take the threat of Russia seriously enough and didn't do what it needed to do to inform the public about the threats that we were undergoing in 2016. So
I don't even think in part fully. I think fully we could put that on him. Interesting. It just clicked because I was living a peaceful, blissful life until 2013. And it's weird because in the end of 2013 is where I feel like anyone who has Ukrainian blood got activated. Like there's some kind of a chip built in all of us, because I've spoken to people, you know, in Canada, everywhere, like Argentina, like Ukrainians everywhere, and everyone was minding their business, doing their own thing, not, you know, some politically active, others weren't. The majority that I actually know weren't. And somewhere once Euromaidan started, and once Russia's operation started in Ukraine, and then come the invasion in February of 2014, everyone kind of just got clicked and like worldwide, and somehow like we all just became active and decided like we need to fight Russia back whichever way we can. So I got involved right actually before Russia's election, and this is how I stumbled and saw Russia attacking the U.S. because I was monitoring Russia and their information operations against Ukraine in 2013, 2014. And then in 2015 is when I saw. But when I went to look back, everything 2013 was such a key year because anything Russia related, whether it was people being activated, people being compromised, think tanks being set up, disinformation operations, their shills being acquired and becoming Kremlin collectibles, everything happened in 2013. And the fact that this show came out in 2013 now makes me also, that's another data point, because here you have Russia who's preparing to invade Ukraine, and then you have, this show coming out painting Russia as like this, like that they actually have some kind of morals. And then interestingly, by 2015 in Kiev, they opened the KGB archives, and talk about how the parents kept from the kid, that they were spies, and the poor kids are like, what the fuck, when they land in Moscow. In 2015, when people went to look at the KGB archives in Kiev, it is the most painful thing you will ever see, because there's not one family, and this applies in Russia, this applies in Ukraine, in Belarus, frankly, anything that was under the control and held hostage by the Soviet Union, where the family didn't betray each other. And in the KGB archives, you see how your mother was informing on you, the father was informing on the mother, the uncle was informing on this one, your neighbor, and like everyone was a KGB informant informing on their neighbors, their family members, pretty much everyone. Like there's not one family that wasn't affected of seeing their family members betraying them with this. And Russia does this, as a very, like one of their tactics, where they turn families against families and make you worship the state. That's the number one.
I think that's so interesting. Sorry to cut you off. I think, you're opening my eyes a little bit to how I'm watching the show now, because this isn't a spoiler for anything, but I found myself, as I've watched it, like I said, 4 times probably through, cheering for the Russians, because it's from their point of view, right? And so you start to learn more about them, you start to understand them, and it makes you want Kerry Russell and Matthew, whatever, to win. In my
but
brain,
at the same time, I think that's kind of the brilliance of the show. Like maybe I'm a more educated viewer than most people, but like I'm looking at them and I'm saying, okay, yes, like they've constructed the narrative in such a way that you feel for them, you associate them. In the first episode, right, we witness Kerry Russell's horrible rape when she's a cadet, right? They're planting these narrative seeds, and people always have that stuff. But these are also really fucked up people. Like I had forgotten the extent to which the violence and the sex in this show are so intertwined. And when I was watching it, my sister was rewatching with me and my husband. I was like, I don't really feel like, my sister's older than me too. I was like, I feel like I can't witness this scene while my sister's in the room. But like, they go and they literally put the defector into a body bag and pour acid all over his body, and then have sex in the car. And like that stuff happens throughout the show, right? So even though, you find yourselves maybe sympathizing with them and the FBI is full of bumbling dorks, it's also like, these are deeply messed up people, like deeply messed up on a level that we maybe, I'm sure some people are, but nobody in this room is, right? I don't know. I think it's part of the narrative brilliance of this show.
Right.
I was gonna say, you see the dad defending his daughter in the mall, and then he goes and beats that guy up and says he's going to kill him if he doesn't again. So it's almost making him look like a hero and like a shining armor, and he has morals and things like
especially,
that.
Especially against the women in his family, because it's very clear that Philip's character, and you see, so like I was noticing even Jess, and I used to be an actor, and so I'm always like watching their faces to like look for subtleties of reactions and like changes in their breath and things like that. And while he's sitting there listening to that like sex tape of his wife with whoever it was, the in the beginning, you could
the DOJ guy, I think
it was the guy who was blabbering probably at Joe's Stone Crab or something like that.
Nice one, Michelle. Go ahead.
But Ching, and you could see Matthew Rhys just kind of like clench his jaw and like his kind of he was uncomfortable, and I was thinking about that, especially as his character is about to take this guy for the money because he doesn't think America's so bad, and why don't we just go? And all of that changes in an instant when he realizes this man has raped his wife.
Philip, don't!
How did he hurt you?
And it was, maybe I'm thinking about all of this differently just because the moment we're living in right now, with having read through page after page after page of the Epstein files lately, like seeing a character that stands up for both his daughter and wife, who were both either sexually assaulted or the threat of sexual assault, and a man who was preying on little girls. Like that really stuck out to me a lot. And I mean, it also just speaks to, what a great actor Matthew Rhys is. I love him. He's amazing. And
we're going to get him on the show just to make Michelle happy.
I need both of them. I'm obsessed with both of them. And Matthew Rhys is the sexiest dork I've ever seen in my life.
That's the best. I rented
10 out of 10.
Boat. I rented his little boat. He had that boat in Brooklyn that I took Craig for my 40th birthday. We rode it around the harbor, and I rented his boat, and I was like, is he gonna be here? And he wasn't.
Is it like a houseboat?
No, it was a wooden boat from 1934 that he bought.
He's the nerdiest
eBay.
Man.
Yeah, he bought it on eBay, and then like he and some other people or whatever fixed it up during COVID.
Well, people than buying the Staten Island ferry, at least.
Right.
Davidson, he's not stupid.
One thing I wonder, and this is going to your criticism, Olga, which I take very seriously, and I think that the show is trying to pit them in some center ground between being Americans and being Soviets.
Mm.
And I think it's trying to make us, guess all along which way are they going to go. Do they, after so much time in America, do they start to admire America, take on some belief in America? We're not going to know for a long time, but I think in a way that's kind of the clever piece of it is to do both. What amazed me about that first episode that I'd forgotten was how it introduced all the major plot lines in that first episode. I didn't remember that Martha was in that episode.
Me either.
I agree.
Martha.
I didn't remember that Stan actually came across and then went into the garage.
Mm-hmm.
And
Phillips, they're like waiting.
He's within an inch of
gun.
blowing the whole plot up. And if he had like that, actually, the fact that his wife and kind of his skepticism convinces him that nothing is there, like keeps the show going.
And that's interesting because in 1981, that's the one thing, and I could tell you even in the 1990s, the FBI was completely oblivious when it came to Russian intelligence operations.
Yeah.
Oblivious, beyond oblivious. And only did they see, saw, even events. I grew up on Brighton Beach, which is all Russian mafia, but the Russian mafia, unlike Italian mafia, Russian mafia is basically an arm of Russian security services, and they carry out, as many other things, operations for them. So Russia has that, plausible deniability. And the FBI took all the incidents, the murders and things that were happening, laundering of money or tax evasion, the trafficking of women, everything that was happening on Brighton, they took it as, like with Italian mafia, as like individual cases versus seeing it as a geopolitical threat. And it didn't happen until maybe after Hansen that they finally realized the full picture, which we're talking about in the early 2000s. And by the 90s, Brighton Beach was like covered with FBI. Like they had a FBI van on every corner because the Russians, you could buy a passport, you could buy a driver's license, you could clean your driver's license. They were trafficking women and they would take their papers, pretty much like what Epstein was doing. They were doing it there. And there was like a horrific case one day where this woman like lost her mind and went running out screaming, and that's got the attention of the local precinct. and they uncovered that there was actually a sex trafficking ring. And what the Russians were doing was putting ads into the paper, like for housekeeping, babysitting, and whatnot. They would bring these girls, take their passports, force them into this, being raped, basically. And they couldn't say a word, or they would threaten to kill the family back home. And the FBI treated all these things as individual things. So that the fact when I saw that FBI agent, with his little curiosity breaking into the garage, I'm like, oh no.
I want to say this because I want to put this in context, Olga, to your point about what kind of operation was this? Let's put in context what was going on when the show first premiered, right? The Sopranos, which kind of set the template for the anti-hero, had ended. Mad Men, which set the following template for the anti-hero, had just ended, right? Didn't you say that you started watching this, Michelle, or Craig? You told her to watch this because Mad Men had just ended, right? So you went from the Sopranos, where Tony was a mobster and you rooted for Tony, but I'm not so sure that the mob was like the greatest thing in the world. I don't know that there were people like running to sign up and join the mob, the Italian mafia, even though obviously everybody loved Tony.
And Jersey.
I of course
Brooklyn too.
That's North Jersey, Jeff. That's a whole separate part of Jersey.
Hey.
But as they said in The Sopranos, South Jersey when they talked about the Chechen. So The Sopranos obviously did not make people want to join the mafia, despite loving Tony Soprano. I don't know that people loved Don Draper, but nobody really appreciated that they wanted to work in a 1960s advertising office after the way people were treated there.
When was Breaking Bad too? We're talking about anti-heroes.
Oh yeah, that was
right. Breaking Bad. I don't think anybody wants to become a meth, purveyor.
2008.
I wonder if this was the same thing, right? Where they were just anti-heroes who were complex in the sense that you were supposed to root for them, despite the fact that they're working for the enemy, in the same way that Tony was working for the enemy, in the same way that Breaking Bad was a drug dealer. What's his name was Walter White was a drug dealer. In the same sense that Don Draper obviously was a horrific husband and human and everything else, although he is my
really
your heartthrob. We heard that. We learned that the other day.
Yes, he is my boyfriend, but not a good man. But nevertheless, I wonder if that, Olga, is much more than anything else, that in a line of prestige television that existed back then, which I don't think exists today anymore, unless somebody wants to correct me.
I don't know, because the creator was the director or whatever, in terms, the person behind the producer, whatever, that part, was a former CIA. So you would think CIA would know at least the basics and not to make the illegals look
Or
good.
could we flip it on its head and say, maybe they're trying to inform about a threat that's coming, right? I mean, these people, again, they're like cold-blooded killers for 5 seasons, and we sympathize with them because they're human.
And also Joe Weisberg, right? So Joe Weisberg wrote the episode. He was the series creator, and he set out in the beginning to tell a story about marriage, and he wanted the story to be more about marriage than anything else. And I think then the Russian plotline kind of, took a life of its own. But I mean, again, the two characters kind of represent the two ideologies.
Yeah, he also wanted there to be an allegory for that ideological
right.
And that's why I was surprised that the Phillips doubts came up even in that first episode. The other thing is the pressure on them, that what could happen to them any minute, not just from the Americans, but if they misstep from the KGB. I don't know if any of you read Sean Walker's book, The Illegals, last year.
Yes,
talking about
good. Oh my God,
it's very, very, very good, and I think we should get him on the show. He's a Guardian international correspondent, a Russia hand, and I think that what it reveals is the fear from both sides that the illegals lived in the whole time, and the real ones. That if they misstepped, well, they were expendable.
Well, that I mean came with everyone knew that, with Russia's security services. I actually know a former KGB who was stationed here. Actually, his first day was he arrived in DC was the day that Hansen came to resubmit himself to come to work for the KGB, because he worked for the GRU in the late 70s and stopped working for GRU in the early 80s, took a break after he confessed and was told basically to say 10 Hail Marys by Opus Dei, which is another long story. And then by the mid 80s, he went and gave his code name to the Russian embassy in DC.
Just to interrupt you for people who don't know. So you're talking about Robert Hansen, who was a FBI agent who spied for the Soviets and then for Russian intelligence from 1979, I believe, through 2001. I mean,
wasn't he charged with treason or something like that?
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah. I was like, there was one other.
He was one of the worst cases.
Yeah.
Julie, I'd like to go back to your anti-hero insight. And also saying that TV today is not what it was then, and I agree very much. I wonder whether, it was brilliant television. It goes off things like Hill Street Blues, that were, LA Law, that were much more bright light about humanity. Cosby at the beginning, weren't we fooled? And so on. And the anti-hero TV was brilliant, but did it instill in American culture a kind of cynicism that we couldn't return from?
Right. But am I going to root for the bad guy just because he, sticks it to the good guys? I mean, it's like, it's exhausting actually I was talking to Craig about this. I think, recently we were texting about, I don't know what, but I was like, everything sucks. Everything sucks. I need like happy stuff. I need happy stuff to watch. I need happy stuff to do. Like, I think that if I was watching this for the first time now, like if this show came out now, I don't know that it would do as well.
Be too nervous.
Right.
So, Greg, do you agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, I still think there's some good TV shows out there. I watch all the
same.
I know. Yeah. But I mean, do you agree that this show would make you nervous if it was happening now because of everything that's happening in the world, or is it a diversion still?
I don't know. I think it would still be a diversion for me personally. I mean, I tend to agree with Michelle a lot, but it is scary in the vein of today, thinking that this stuff could still be happening, I think, and it definitely is still happening, right? And so I think as I'm rewatching it, I'm like, how many people are still out there? What other countries are doing this? And now with the technology that has arisen, they were in 1981, they didn't have tracking, cell phones, things like that, and like drones are just getting smaller. Like, I mean, you can do whatever, right? So I think it would still be entertaining, I think, but maybe you are right that it's a little bit.
Now we have it in real life, starting with the White House on down.
Michelle, you said it's more about like a relationship, right? And I was thinking about that. Like they showed them come in 1965, and they were so excited. You could see Philip excited about air conditioning.
I was just,
and they were kind of taking his character there from the beginning of like, wow, maybe he's gonna fall into this trap of like starting to like America. And you see it in the episode that like Elizabeth is like snap out of it, right? Like you have to do it. And it doesn't get to him until he finds out that she was raped by that guy. And right after that, when they kill him, Phil Collins in the Air Tonight song. And I Googled it. Well,
the music is so good.
Miami Vice.
Anachronistic? Wasn't it come out after 1981?
I Googled it and I wanted to see, I don't remember.
Air Tonight was later.
But it was just like fascinating because the whole premise of the song is he's going through a breakup, right? And so he's talking about like, the worst part of his breakup. He was divorcing his wife. And it kind of felt to me like they were kind of breaking up from like this thought of
1981.
But wait, so when in 1981, my friends? Because I'm wrong. It was January 9th, 1981.
Okay, so it was perfect, right? 11 days before. So,
yeah.
But then they're talking in the song about he wouldn't help you if you were drowning, and they dumped that guy into the water. So it was like,
it's so good. It's so good.
Yes. And one other thing, just on a funny topic, that guy was in the trunk for like 3 days.
Yeah, with a dog bag in his mouth. How is he surviving?
And I'm thinking the whole time, how long did he have to pee? Okay.
Right. What does it smell like back there?
Yeah.
I had the same thought. Jaclyn, I want to ask you about this because you did work on some intelligence stuff, I guess, in the Marines or at least on Russia stuff. Does any of this seem true to you? Is there anything here that jumps out at you that's a little kind of doesn't seem like realistic to you, or except for the part that the guy was with a ball gag and not being able to breathe for 3 weeks and 3 days in his trunk?
We're not talking about heated rivalry, are we? Sorry, different ball gag.
It's interesting. I started watching this in 2018. And so at that point in my life, I had I had just moved back to North Carolina to work with the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade and be their lawyer for a 2-star general. And our whole focus was on the Russian problem set. And we had deployed for a total of 4 times. And it worked in Italy for a little bit, and working just on the different problem sets that, come across for issues with what's going on. And so the intelligence briefs would come by. And so this was, I just kind of played into it going, well, now I got to watch the I got to watch the Americans because
right.
In my off time, I got to know what's going on because I don't know, like, if this is real or not, like the imagination of it, like what if things are really happening out there? And I need to just make sure that I just am opening up my aperture to understand that, things are real. And, with the intelligence briefings that we were getting, I kind of was just jumping to conclusions, but it was interesting to see what was going on in real life and the things that we were doing while we were over a year working on the Russian problem set and the intelligence that we were getting. And then to come back and like watch the show and just like see it happening, in 1980 when I was a year and a half years old and, growing up with Ronald Reagan, thinking that this is the first time in history I'm remembering anything important, any semblance of history, Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall and then reading books about it and then recognizing that the Soviet Union fell in the late 80s. And then we kind of just forgot about it for a while. And then the 90s happened and, just kind of fell off our radar. And we just let, the Soviet Union and Russia just kind of keep building back their assets. And they kept fighting and, their guerrilla warfare for such a long time with their goals of retaking, the Western Hemisphere. And we were just out there, having, war plans to go into Iraq on intelligence that was 12 years old and having a coalition of the willing. And then I'm in Iraq on the surge. But meanwhile, Russia's going into Georgia, and I'm going, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to be pivoting and going into Georgia now? And everyone's like, no, like we're in Iraq and Afghanistan, like we don't care about Russia. And then, I end up going over to Okinawa, and then it was the whole pivot to the Pacific. So then we were focused on China and North Korea. And so then I was deployed over there doing, pivot to the Pacific things in 2012, 2013. And then I come back and I go to the Naval Academy and teach. And then I go to North Carolina and we start focusing on the Russian problem set. So it was like this whole 20-year hiatus. And I'm going, well, what's happening in these 20 years? So then I'm doing all this reading. And then I end up going to watch the Americans because I want to like piece it all together to understand what happened in history. What do I remember? And what have I been working on since? And it's just interesting to see, the intelligence briefings that were going on. And then I'm watching the Americans to kind of put it all together.
Well, I want to say this about the Americans, and Jeff, because you were around for this too. First of all,
you keep on pointing out how old I am.
No, me too. I'm about to make a point about what's not true about the Americans. Kerry Russell's hair was very 21st century. There's no big Aquanet, big hair.
I have no complaints about Kerry Russell's hair.
I know. Kerry Russell's had enough people obsessed with her hair. I'm just suggesting that neither hers nor Martha's. Stan Bean's wife had ear appropriate hair, but that's about it.
Yeah. It was like some 70s, like
a little bit of a 70s leftover thing. And then the other thing is, where's the blue eyeshadow? Because none of that was happening on the show, and I have to say that's just not how I recall things back in the day. A lot of people had a lot better. You only have to watch the Duran Duran video from 1981 to understand what women were wearing back then, but or Bananarama or anybody else. But it's so funny because I was watching their reaction to the air conditioning. We landed at JFK on May 6, 1980, when we came here, and we had cousins who we'd never met, but who were American, who came and met us. And my cousin brought me a box of Crayola crayons. And I had the same reaction that Philip had. I was like, what the hell? Like, what? I can't believe it. And then she took us to her mother's house. And she had something that I swear to God to this day, if a Martian came down from outer space in a spaceship right now and landed in my apartment in New York City, I'd have less of a reaction that I did. We went to her house and she had a remote control, like a TV remote control. And we had just gotten a TV in Moscow after years and years and years, like 6 months before we left. My grandparents got a TV, and of course there was
Lucky you. My family, my dad was like with the Soviet mentality, the TV rots the brain. No
yeah, well,
TV.
no. So but this is my older grandparents. This is not for me at all. But yeah, of course. No, we didn't have a remote control or TV rots the brain. I'm talking about my cousin. We're going to my cousin's apartment, but it was a color TV with a remote control, and I literally had the same reaction that Philip did, where I was like, "What is this?" My parents were, all of us were like standing around this thing, like, how is this possible that this thing could communicate with a remote control? Yeah, crazy things that we take for granted now. That obviously So I saw that scene with Philip and Elizabeth looking at the window unit, and I mean, like, I get it. I so get what they were seeing, because that part is very true to life, I thought.
It was also impressive in the story arc, because you saw that they were innocents.
Mm-hmm.
They were they might as well have come from Arkansas. And no offense to those from Arkansas. And but they had that kind of country bumpkin sense about them. And then you fast forward to when we know them in the current of the show, and they are sophisticates, and they've learned the ways. And they get along. Jaclyn, I want to go back to what you said, if I can, for a second, because I think you're so right. And this plays off what you've said, Olga and Nina, as well. Is at the time after the wall did come down, after the fall of the Soviet Union, when Obama said what he said in that debate, I think American culture as a whole just didn't pay attention to Russia, didn't see Russia as a threat, and so this show was, I wonder at the time how much of a brave warning it was seen to be.
So that year, my final year of graduate school, and I did my degree in Russian and East European studies. So like we were a bunch of, naive 20-somethings who thought we were going to go work at the State Department or whatever. And I remember very distinctly the day in 2012, I believe, that Putin issued this order that USAID would get out of Russia. And we were all in the office at Georgetown where our program was, and somebody was like, well, there goes our jobs. And to some extent that was true, because all of the organizations that received funding from USAID to do democracy support, to do anti-AIDS stuff, to do, what have you, all of them had to pull out. USAID pulled out. The US Embassy drew down a lot of its staff that had been there. And then we started seeing sort of the tit for tat going back and forth with sanctions leading up to 2016. So it felt very appropriate to me at the time that we were placing this emphasis on Russia, especially because I also remember in 2012 and 2013 and 2014, as Euromaidan and then the annexation of Crimea were happening, the fact that, and I was working at the time at the National Democratic Institute, so I was going to a lot of stuff around Russia. Nobody was taking the threat seriously, as you say, Jeff, and you too, Olga. Like, I remember one of my first weeks on the job, I went to an event at an organization here in town. It was looking at the Moscow mayoral election in 2013. And that was when Alexei Navalny had run for mayor of Moscow. At the time, he was a rising star, started as a LiveJournal blogger. A lot of people saw like Russia's future in him. He, I think got 20-something% of the vote, just under what he needed to get to the second round. And I remember a person in Washington saying politics is back in Russia. And within less than a year, Russia had then, annexed Crimea and was essentially invading Ukraine, right? And so people were really slow to recognize that until MH17 was shot down in 2014 in July. And that's when it seemed like Washington kind of snapped into a realization that things were getting bad, but it was bad over there. It wasn't bad for us. And I write about this in my first book, this hubris that we had, thinking that our institutions were going to protect us. Our institutions can only protect us if, they are galvanized to the threat. And that did not happen for too long.
and if people understand the threat, because I got involved in 2013, and I couldn't believe. I mean, Americans and Europeans were like literally on a mental vacation and focused elsewhere. And I'm like, how is it like no one cares? That one. Russia was testing Ukraine because Ukraine was the testing ground for everything, whether harming political parties, compromising politicians. I mean, every single thing, media, everything. I didn't understand how everyone kind of overlooked it, but at the same time I did, because I was, always read and kept up with what was happening domestically in Russia. And when I saw Americans pitching Putin, and Europeans, like he's this anti-corruption person. And I'm like, meanwhile, you're reading Novaya Gazeta and it's like, oh, and Patrushev and Putin and FSB might be involved in the apartment building bombings. I'm like, where is the rest of the world? Like, if Novaya Gazeta, suspects that FSB and, not only suspect, but saw evidence of it, where are our intelligence services, And then after that, you see Litvinenko, who fled. I actually have a friend who helped Litvinenko leave Russia, and he met him on the other side in Georgia, and they traveled, whatever, eventually got to UK, where Litvinenko then started cooperating with security services until he was poisoned. And then even with that, I mean, how, this was like the 2000s, and Russia deployed, polonium into a Western country to murder someone who defected. And everyone just went on business as usual. I mean, like in any other normal world, I mean, that's, I think, more serious than, Saddam Hussein's imaginary weapons of mass destruction, when you actually have a weapon of mass destruction being used in the cities of, London.
Or Iran's imaginary nuclear weapon.
Yeah. My God, that I have to say, I'll give one thing to Bush. He actually, with Cheney, they spent like months, preparing people and like feeding them bullshit about why we're going into Iraq. Here, they don't even know. Like I watch shows, with Republicans coming on, and they're being questioned, like, what's so imminent? And they're like, yes, this is so imminent. 47 years they've been chanting death to America. I'm like, who is providing the PR for your appearances? Because I mean, 47 years of chance and imminent are like complete opposites. So anyway, so yeah, that's with Russia. Like it was always there. And people should have woken up with Georgia and the invasion, but sadly, here we are reliving the Americans.
Well, and speaking of Iran, which we're recording this on March 1st, so we'll see what happens between now and when we release this. But I was just thinking, like, because Julie and I were talking about this offline. Culturally, what was going on when this show started? The hostages had been released recently, right before then. John Lennon had been shot just a month before. There was a new president who, the boss Russian guy I wrote down, he says to Elizabeth,
the American people have elected a madman as their president.
The American people have elected a madman. And I was like, oh, just you wait. Just you wait. And I wonder, and then we're thinking about what's going on, when this show started in 2013. I always, I think about how will people look back to this moment that we're living in and what was happening culturally here, and how much of it is intertwined, with how we live our lives. I think I can speak for most of us here. Like, what we think about day and night is like how shitty things are, and how uncertain the future feels. And I wonder, like, did people feel that way in 1980 with the threat of nuclear, annihilation? Or
Yeah. I mean, I think Jeff, you were
That's the reminder.
I'm old enough to have hid under my desk. Yes.
You're old enough to be hiding under your desk. I was a kid, but I remember being told by my father in 1981 very clearly, and I, maybe I should go to therapy over this particular conversation, but he sat me down. I remember this in a pocket park in the Bronx where we were living, and he said, just so you know, there is something called a nuclear weapon. There are nuclear weapons that are being aimed at as we sit here right now, nuclear weapons being aimed at us from the Soviet Union. And if they don't kill you right away, you're going to die of cancer.
Oh my God.
And I said, what are you talking? Cancer? What? And I was like 7. I was like, what? And he's like, no, really. I mean, you either die slowly or die quickly. Like, you better pray to God you die quickly when that. And I was like, okay. So the point is, like, yes, these are things maybe that everybody's parents told them when they were. But certainly my parents, my father felt the need. Which again, I would love to hear from people in the chat whether this was just mine. I don't think.
Yeah, my dad talked about a lot, but not nuclear.
Yeah. So I had a very Russian father. It was like, I had a very Russian father.
Communism, yes, and carrying on why the country needs to collapse.
But I also want to put in perspective what was going on culturally in Russia when Elizabeth and Philip Jennings were starting the show, right? Because what was happening is that Leonid Brezhnev was the head of the Soviet Union. He'd been around for a long time. The country was in complete stagflation economically. They had just gotten into Afghanistan. That war was not yet the shit show that it obviously became many years later. They were promised very much. Like we were promised that this was going to be a short war. They would come back as victors, and who the hell were the Afghans? They were Afghanis. They were just a bunch of cave-dwelling idiots, and the mighty Soviet army was going to steamroll them, and Afghanistan was potentially going to be the 16th Soviet Republic, whatever it was. But that was told to the Soviets. They had just come off an Olympics in 1980,
which we boycotted.
Because of their invasion of Afghanistan. It was their Summer Olympics. We had the Lake Placid Olympics. Back then, the Olympics were same years. So Lake Placid was in 1980 here. The Winter Olympics, the Summer Olympics were in Moscow, Luzhniki in Moscow. And so, if you were going to be a Russian spy, a Soviet spy, as the Jennings were in 1981, you might have thought that Russia was on the ascendant, in the sense that, again, Afghanistan had not yet become a quagmire. The Olympics had taken place. Reagan had just come to power, but he was an actor. He was this, who is this guy? This guy who just goes around saying crazy stuff.
Yep, they were tough.
They were tough, and the thing about the Jennings that was interesting is they had left in the 1960s. So they had left, and I did the math. She said that she was 2 years old when her father died at Stalingrad. So she Elizabeth was born circa 1940, which would make her 86 right now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Just think about that. But she had left in the 1960s before, they are my parents' generation. By the time my parents left, and Olga, I'd love to hear from you what you think about this, but they were really jaded, right? Like they were like the 70s, they were like, okay, like the regime, the big joke was, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work, right? Like that's the kind of deal that we have. This, like it wasn't the true believer generation of, maybe the Jennings parents who had gone through World War II. These were people who had come of age in the 60s and 70s and were like, whatever. But the Jennings left before that, before they had a chance to get cynical. And so for them, they were still true believers, and watching what they were watching come out of the Soviet Union, it was still that, of course, this is a country that's going to win. Of course they are, because the Soviet Union is not the decadent, weak, effete country that they were convinced the United States was, which is where I think Elizabeth Jennings' mentality comes from, Nadezhda, whatever her name is, but her mentality comes from in a way that I think Philip maybe did not. He was sort of starting to get wise to the fact that, wait a second, it's not so bad here. And she was like, no, wait, this is what we're always taught. These people are too weak. We're going to kick their ass. We're going to collapse the United States.
There's a line even when Henry, the car is getting fixed and he's like, can we trade in the Oldsmobile for like a sports car or something? And Philip says, no, Henry.
I don't think your mom would like that.
Why not?
She doesn't like new things.
Your mother doesn't like new things.
Right.
Right.
And there were,
right.
there was some indication there, but I also was thinking just culturally too, like speaking of Lake Placid, and the Americans beating the Russians in hockey, and maybe just hockey's on the mind right now for all the reasons. But I noticed that that's the one thing that Philip doesn't kick away. You know what I mean? Like he plays hockey with Henry. They go to the rink early in the morning, and I'm thinking to myself, like, that's a super Russian thing, right? Like playing hockey as a kid. And it was just interesting to me that like that was the one thing from their past that they did not reject when they went to the United States. Like this was the pilot. This was the first episode that aired. And I honestly, Craig, Jeff, maybe you guys know better than me, 3.22 million viewers watched the first episode of this when it aired. I don't know. Is that like
on a lesser cable network?
On a cable show, yes.
On FX.
Yeah, on FX.
I used to buy TV ads, Michelle. I think we've talked about this.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
And this was in the early 2000s, so 2004, 5, 6. But cable was not desirable to buy on, right? I mean, you would literally buy cable, and it would run across whatever network it ran on, right? And so like you would buy ABC, NBC, Fox, and then cable. So to have a number that big, and I know that is 9 years after I was working in that space.
Yeah.
That was a big number. And then I was looking and I was comparing it to the Breaking Bads, the Mad Men finales and stuff like that. And those shows that had been around, it beat those numbers, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, it was, I think, very popular for FX.
Yeah. Well, and it was, this episode was directed by Gavin O'Connor. And I mentioned earlier, it was written by Joe Weisberg, who is the series creator, after he had read the book An Ordinary Spy by Graham Yost, I believe. And I also just wanted to give some props to the casting department for this show, because I think that is so important with the show. I think why it landed the way it did. We've kind of been experiencing a departure from this with so many television shows that have uber A-list stars kind of at the head of every show. And I think what we learned with Heated Rivalry, not to keep bringing that show up, but they cast people who were unknowns, people we didn't know. And yes, we knew Kerry Russell as one of the millennials on this podcast. We saw her. I watched her in the Mickey Mouse
Felicity.
Club.
I did not watch the Mickey Mouse Club. I didn't have cable.
I guess I was a lucky Disney kid, and because Kerry Russell was on the Disney Mickey Mouse Club from 1991 to 1994, and then she did Felicity. But like, she's really kind of the only one. Like Matthew Reese was on
Sisters, which was
but like I know, but like he wasn't
a huge name. He wasn't a ratings draw.
Right. I mean, here's this guy. He's born in Cardiff, Wales.
Have you heard him? Have you heard his real voice?
It's amazing.
Amazing.
His Welsh accent.
Well, it comes out in the show sometimes. Like when he has more, I guess, like emotional scenes. Like I noticed it when he says to Elizabeth, our children are Americans and you can't stand that.
They will be American and you can't stand that. I see it every day.
Instead of saying stand that, he's like, stop. Like you can hear like his Welsh accent come out a little bit, and it gets better as the season goes on. But like in the beginning, it sneaks out, And then I was looking at the guy who plays Stan Beeman, Noah Emmerich. Is that his name? Who you saw?
I saw in Central Park once.
You saw him right. And did you say hi?
I think I waved. Yeah, I didn't know. He was playing with his hands on. I think.
He's probably like, yeah, okay, whatever.
The kids were cast well.
Yeah,
kids were cast well. Yes. Martha was perfectly cast.
Wasn't she when Four Weddings and a Funeral? Wasn't she duck faced, or am I thinking about somebody else?
No, that was not her. No, because Allison Wright's fairly young. I think she's like in her early 40s. I think.
Oh, okay.
When did the two stars end up in real life coming together?
Oh yeah. So Matthew Reed.
It was a couple years in.
Couple years in.
It after the show ended. They were like, and actually now we're having a baby together.
Yeah.
You're living my dream.
But there's just like so many theater people in this show, and I think it goes, to show that all these theater folks have real chops, and the casting director I think just did a really great job, and even Paige was like a theater kid. She was in Billy Elliot on Broadway. You know, and it's just you're not distracted by their fame and celebrity as you're watching it, and I really appreciate that, because I think sometimes when we watch these other shows that have super famous people in them, you're kind of bringing all of their other stuff with them as you experience the television show. But I didn't feel that the first time I watched the show, except for Kerry Russell, obviously. But so anyways, I just wanted to, you know, give props to the casting, because I think they did a great job.
And I didn't know anyone from the cast except Felicity. That's it. Everyone else, I need to.
Matthew Reese, because I had watched Brothers and Sisters. But you're right. He was not a big.
Yeah, no, not yet. I mean, he is now. His career is like totally, I mean, blown up. He's doing everything now.
Yeah.
Same with her. So, you know.
So we're gonna, I think, now that we've set the predicate for the political aspect of what was happening, we're gonna focus much more on the show itself and talk more about the cultural impact and what was happening in different episodes. But we did think it was important to set the template for politically what was going on and culturally what was going on back then. And Michelle, you're so right to have said that John Lennon had just been shot a month and a half. Prior
Maybe
to
this is too obvious, Julie, but I was just thinking about it while we were chatting. Like, even just calling it the Americans makes you think that they're on the American side in a weird way. Like they're the Americans. It wasn't called the Russians or the illegals.
The illegals, right?
You're already tricked into thinking that, like, oh, they're Americans, like, right? So I just tried to think that through as well. And Olga talks about how, you know, maybe it's being taught from a side that we shouldn't think about. And as you think about the Ellisons buying every cable news out there, we're going to start seeing more stories that are being influenced on the bad side, right? And so, like, we got to really start wits about us when we're watching TV these days to think, like, these people are all controlling the narrative now, and we need to really critical.
Yeah, like whose scripts are getting greenlit and who's behind them.
Right.
Think of the shows that The Sopranos would not be made now.
No.
Think of the shows on HBO that would not be made now.
Yeah. No way.
My last thought is, for anyone rewatching this, by no means was there any KGB operative who had any moral clarity of any sort. Even the one, like I said, that I know who was stationed in DC, he ended up defecting eventually. It had nothing to do with morals. It had nothing to do with anything. It was opportunistic. That's it. He had a better opportunity from Americans. So that's the one thing. And the KGB was a very, very cruel organization. I mean, they literally have no qualms of, you know, cutting pieces off of people and delivering them to their family members and with a smile. And that's it. So. Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the title of the Americans. There was different layers of assimilation with the Americans, right? You've got Philip and Elizabeth layered in as superficially American, but their children are pretty much all in as Americans. They don't even realize what their parents are doing. And then Elizabeth kind of struggling with they get to choose, but I want them to choose being Russian at the end of the day when I have something to do with it. So I think the Americans, the title, I think is a layered message to the audience of not just looking at the relationship between Elizabeth and Philip and their jobs, but also the children and the way the children play in to their roles and Elizabeth and Philip's job and how it kind of conflicts with their job versus them raising their children. I just think it's really interesting.
You're reminding me of, I left San Francisco and the Examiner in 1981 to come to New York. One of the last things I did in San Francisco was a story we worked on when they developed at the Lawrence Livermore Lab the neutron bomb, going back to your nuke fears, right? The bomb that would kill people but leave buildings intact. And one of the most irresponsible journalistic things I did, among other things, was with a colleague, we had a big, on page 1 of the paper, we had a big map of San Francisco. And if it exploded in Lawrence Livermore Lab, here's all of the kill zone that it would have. So my only point is that fear of nukes was by no means gone in the 80s. It was still there. We were still developing weapons against them. It was still something that was on people's minds.
Yeah, we've kind of touched on the music a little bit, but I just want to give more props to how perfectly like tracked, especially the initial operation over the Fleetwood Mac song, and it comes back at the end, like it's just perfect. And it reminded me actually a little bit, because we just, I don't know if you guys all did the saga that was Stranger Things, but very similar to the way that the Duffers used some of the relics of 80s pop culture in Stranger Things. Also the theme song, it's one of the greatest theme songs of TV history, in my opinion. I mean, like years later, 13 years after it started, I can still sing most of it to you. I'm not going to do it right now, but yeah, it's a great song, and the music for the whole show. I'm going to keep commenting on it because I think it's just so evocative and perfect.
It is so great to be doing this. We are going to be back next week. Some compilation, anybody who wants to show up for next week for season 1.
Except the real illegals, stay away.
And it is so great to have everybody here, to have everybody bring their expertise in and Russia stuff and culture stuff and advertising. Craig, thank you for telling us actually how big the show was. Actually, it never occurred to me that it was so gangbusters compared to other shows. Jaclyn, with your crazy military background and Russian stuff, which I didn't even know you had, I thought I did not realize that you spent all this time on your Russia brief. And Jeff, of course, with your TV knowledge and also your completely irresponsible scaring the bejesus out of people. That's also good to know. And Michelle, thank you for coming up with this wonderful idea. And
Great idea, Michelle.
Yeah, brilliant, Michelle, and helping us to take our mind off of the horrors of today by thinking about the horrors of 50 years ago almost.
I know. I'm like,
I know. On that note, great to see everybody, and we will see you back here next week. Thanks.
You are listening to the Mayday Network.